25 years had passed since the Battle of Titan's Shadow, and the galaxy barely resembled the war-torn place it had once been. Captain Ryan Cooper stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel UHS Discovery, watching a binary star system that no species had ever visited before. The young officer with blonde hair and bright blue eyes had been born after the war, part of the first generation to grow up in a peaceful galaxy. "Captain, we are detecting artificial structures in orbit around the fourth planet," reported his science officer, Lieutenant Zara Voss. The half-human, half-Valdorian woman represented everything the new galaxy stood for. Her green skin and silver eyes marked her alien heritage, but her Earth accent showed where she had grown up. Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "Any signs of life?" "Unknown, sir. The structures appear to be very old, possibly abandoned for centuries. Behind them, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Humans served alongside reformed Zephyrians, peaceful Nexari, and grateful Valdorians. The Discovery was one of 50 exploration ships that now ventured into unknown space, seeking new worlds and new civilizations to befriend rather than conquer. "Commander Ellis," Cooper called to his first officer, a former Zephyrian warrior named Marcus Ellis, who had taken a human name after the peace accords. "Prepare an away team. Full diplomatic protocols." Ellis nodded, his red skin showing the ritual scars of his military past. "Should we inform Fleet Command?" "Not yet. Let us see what we find first." On Earth, Admiral Lisa Matthews worked in her office at Starfleet headquarters, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. The veteran of the Great War now served as Chief of Exploration Operations, guiding the peaceful expansion of galactic civilization. "Admiral," her aide announced, "you have a visitor." An elderly Zephyrian entered her office, moving slowly but with dignity. Admiral Vex, now in his 70s, had become one of humanity's strongest allies. His once proud bearing had softened into gentle wisdom. "Vex, my old friend," Matthews smiled, standing to greet him. "What brings you to Earth?" "Troubling news, I am afraid," Vex replied, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something unusual in the Outer Rim territories." Matthews frowned. The Outer Rim was unexplored space beyond the borders of known civilization. "What kind of something?" "Energy signatures unlike anything we have seen before. Massive and moving toward our territory. My analysts believe they represent some form of advanced technology." Before Matthews could respond, her communication console chimed with an urgent message. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission from the exploration vessel Discovery." The wall screen activated to show Captain Cooper standing on what appeared to be an alien space station. Behind him, strange architecture curved away into shadows lit by pulsing blue lights. "Admiral Matthews, we have made contact with a new species. They call themselves the Architects, and they claim to have been watching our galaxy for thousands of years." An alien figure moved into view beside Cooper. The being was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its large black eyes held ancient intelligence, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of millennia. "Greetings, young ones," the architect said in perfect standard language. "I am Keeper Thanatos. We have observed your recent transformation with great interest." Matthews exchanged glances with Vex. "Captain Cooper, are you in any danger?" "Negative, Admiral. The Architects appear peaceful, but they have shared some disturbing information about what lies beyond the Outer Rim." Keeper Thanatos stepped forward. "For 10,000 years, we have guarded the borders of this galactic region. We have watched young civilizations rise and fall, usually destroying themselves through war and hatred. But you humans have done something extraordinary." "What do you mean?" Matthews asked. "You achieved victory and chose mercy. You gained power and chose service. You faced hatred and chose love. In all our observations, no species has ever made such choices consistently. The architect paused, its ancient eyes growing sad. "That is why we must warn you. The Devourers approach." Dr. Helen Carter, now director of the Interspecies Research Institute, hurried through the corridors of the lunar facility after receiving an emergency summons. At 83, the elderly scientist moved more slowly than in her younger days, but her mind remained sharp as ever. She found her research team gathered around a holographic display showing star charts of the outer rim. Dr. Kevin Murphy, her assistant and a brilliant young physicist, looked up as she entered. "Dr. Carter, the architects have shared their historical databases with us. What we found is terrifying." The hologram shifted to show a map of nearby galaxy clusters. Red markers indicated dead zones where no intelligent life existed. "The Devourers are a machine civilization that consumes entire galaxies," Murphy explained. "They strip every planet of resources, enslave or destroy all life, and then move on to the next target. According to the architects, they have been working their way through this region of space for millions of years." Carter studied the data with growing alarm. "How long do we have?" Based on their previous pattern of expansion, approximately 5 years before their scout ships reach our outer colonies. The news spread quickly through the galactic communication network. On the reformed Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Marcus, Drex II, grandson of the old emperor, convened an emergency session of his democratically elected council. "Citizens," the young ruler addressed his people through planetary broadcast, "we face a threat greater than any in our history, but we do not face it alone. On the Valdorian homeworld, the gentle beings who had suffered so much under Zephyrian rule now worked frantically to prepare defenses. Elder Council leader Sarah, daughter of the woman who had died in the refugee transport, coordinated evacuation plans for their most vulnerable colonies. "We survived the darkness before," she told her people. "We will survive it again, with our human allies beside us." The Nexari, ancient and wise, opened their vast libraries to share knowledge that might help in the coming fight. Elder Theiss, now over 400 years old, worked with human scientists to develop new technologies. "The Devourers have faced many civilizations," she explained to the research teams, "but they have never faced one united across species boundaries. Perhaps that will make the difference." Captain Ben Foster, now Admiral Foster and commander of the Combined Fleet Academy, received orders to accelerate all training programs. His diverse group of cadets from 15 different species would graduate early to serve in the coming war. "This is not the galaxy I fought to create," he told his students during their final ceremony. "I wanted you to explore and build, not fight and defend. But sometimes the universe forces hard choices upon us." Among his graduating class stood Lieutenant James Kim, son of the former communications officer Sarah Kim. The young human had trained alongside his best friend, Cadet Voss Minor, a Zephyrian whose grandfather had once been an enemy of humanity. "Sir," James asked during the ceremony, "do you think we can win against an enemy that has conquered entire galaxies?" Foster smiled at the earnest young faces before him. "James, 25 years ago, humanity faced impossible odds against the Zephyrian Empire. We won not because we were stronger, but because we were united and because we fought for something greater than ourselves." He gestured to the mixed group of species represented in the graduating class. "Look around you. The Devourers have never faced anything like what we have built here. They expect to find divided, warring civilizations. Instead, they will find a galaxy united in defense of everything we hold dear." Meanwhile, on the exploration ship Discovery, Captain Cooper worked with Keeper Thanatos to gather intelligence about their approaching enemy. The ancient architect had lived through countless galactic cycles and had seen the Devourers destroy civilization after civilization. "They are not evil in the way you understand it," Thanatos explained as they studied holographic records of Devourer attacks. "They are simply machines following their programming. They see biological life as inefficient and seek to replace it with perfect mechanical order." "How do we fight machines on such a scale?" Cooper asked. By being something they cannot. Computer predict, the architect replied. By showing them the one thing their creators never programmed them to understand. Which is? The power of sacrifice for others, the willingness to die for strangers, the choice to protect the weak even when it costs everything. These concepts do not exist in their programming. Back on Earth, the greatest military minds from every species gathered in the war room that had not been used since the Zephyrian conflict. Admiral Rodriguez, now in his 90s but still sharp, studied the tactical displays with Admiral Matthews and their alien counterparts. The good news, Rodriguez announced to the assembled officers, is that we have 5 years to prepare. The bad news is that our enemy has been perfecting conquest for millions of years. General Patricia Hayes, now elderly but still commanding ground forces, pointed to the defensive plans. We cannot match their numbers or their technology, but we have something they do not. What is that? Asked Admiral Vex. We have each other, Hayes replied simply. And we have learned that fighting for something you love makes you stronger than fighting for something you want. 3 months after the Battle of Titan's Shadow, the galaxy looked very different. News of the Zephyrian defeat had traveled to every corner of known space, carried by traders, refugees, and the few surviving alien warships that had witnessed the impossible. On the Nexari homeworld, the ancient council of elders gathered in their crystal chambers for the first time in 50 years. These wise beings had lived for centuries, watching empires rise and fall like waves on a shore. Elder, this oldest among them, studied the reports with her large silver eyes. The humans destroyed over 300 Zephyrian vessels in a single battle, she said to her fellow counselors. Yet they took prisoners instead of executing them. They offered medical aid to their enemies. This is not the behavior of conquerors, Elder. Van nodded his ancient head. The Valdorian refugees speak of human kindness. They say these beings risk their lives to protect strangers. Perhaps the old stories were true after all. Meanwhile, in the prisoner camps on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Admiral Vex sat in his comfortable cell writing his memoirs. The former Zephyrian commander had spent weeks trying to understand how his massive fleet had been defeated so completely. Captain Chris Taylor visited him regularly. The human officer treated his prisoner with respect despite the countless worlds Vex had destroyed. Today, Taylor brought tea and sat across from the alien commander. I have been thinking about your question, Vex said suddenly. You asked me once why we conquered peaceful worlds. Taylor sipped his tea and waited for the answer. Because we could, Vex continued. Because they were weak, and we were strong. Because taking what we wanted was easier than building it ourselves. He paused, staring at his hands. But you humans are stronger than us, and yet you heal our wounded and share your food with prisoners. Why? Taylor considered the question carefully. Because strength without mercy makes you a monster. Because today's enemy might be tomorrow's. Friend, because that is what humans do. Across the galaxy on Zephyr Prime, Emperor Drex paced his throne room like a caged animal. The proud ruler who had once commanded fear throughout the known worlds now faced rebellion in his own territories. 3 outer systems had declared independence. His remaining admirals questioned every order. My lord, General Corax entered the chamber nervously. The human ambassador has arrived. Drex laughed bitterly. An ambassador? They defeat my entire fleet and then send a diplomat? These creatures make no sense. Admiral Rodriguez walked into the throne room accompanied by only 2 guards. The human diplomat wore simple clothes instead of military uniform. His gray hair and kind eyes made him look more like a grandfather than the commander who had crushed the Zephyrian Empire. Your Majesty, Rodriguez said with a polite bow, I come bearing terms for peace. Peace? Drex snarled. You humiliate my forces and then offer peace? Why not simply conquer my empire and be done with it? Rodriguez smiled sadly. Because conquest creates hatred, Your Majesty. Hatred leads to rebellion. Rebellion leads to war. We prefer cooperation to conflict. The human ambassador placed a datapad on the marble floor between them. These are our terms. Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories. Reparations to the peoples you have enslaved. Democratic reforms to give your citizens a voice in government. In return, we offer trade agreements, medical technology, and protection from external threats. Drex stared at the device as if it were a poisonous snake. And if I refuse? Then your empire will collapse anyway, Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. Your outer worlds are already in rebellion. Your military is demoralized. Your economy depends on slave labor that the galaxy will no longer tolerate. We are offering you a chance to transform your empire into something better. On the trading station Deepport 9, merchants from a dozen species gathered to discuss the changing galaxy. The massive space station had always been neutral territory where even enemies could meet safely. Today, the conversations all centered on the same topic. The humans have opened trade negotiations with everyone, said a Nexari trader named Zix. They offer advanced technology in exchange for peaceful cooperation. A Valdorian merchant named Kess nodded enthusiastically. My cousin works in their medical exchange program. Human doctors are teaching our healers techniques that can cure diseases we thought were impossible to treat. Even former Zephyrian colonists spoke with wonder about human generosity. They could have executed all our administrators, one said quietly. Instead, they offer job training and new homes for those who renounce conquest. Dr. Helen Carter walked through the corridors of the new Interspecies Medical Institute on Earth's moon. The research facility buzzed with activity as human scientists worked alongside alien researchers to solve medical problems that affected all species. Dr. Carter called her assistant, a young Valdorian named Tira. The cancer treatment trials are showing incredible results. The combination of human genetics, research, and Nexari cellular therapy could save millions of lives. Carter smiled as she watched human and alien doctors working side by side. This was the future she had dreamed of during the long years of preparation, not conquest or domination, but cooperation and shared knowledge. In the rebuilt Valdorian colonies, children who had lost everything in the Zephyrian attacks now played in schools built with human technology. Elder Mira, now an old woman, told stories to these youngsters about the dark time before the humans returned. Were the ghost warriors really invisible? Asked a wide-eyed child. Mira chuckled. They were hidden, little one, but not by magic. They were hidden by patience and wisdom. They waited until the moment was right, and then they struck like lightning to protect those who could not protect themselves. Captain Lisa Matthews, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UHS Guardian. The vessel patrolled the borders of human space, watching for threats, but also helping any ship in distress regardless of species or origin. Admiral, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Nick Palmer, we are receiving a distress call from a Zephyrian freighter. Their engines have failed and they are drifting toward an asteroid field. Set course to intercept, Matthews ordered without hesitation. Prepare the rescue teams. Ma'am, should I remind you that we are technically still at war with the Zephyrian Empire? Matthews shook her head. Lieutenant, we do not rescue ships because of politics. We rescue them because that is what decent beings do. 1 year after the battle, representatives from 57 different worlds gathered on the neutral moon of Sanctuary for the first Galactic Peace Conference. The massive assembly hall had been built specifically for this historic meeting, with sections designed to accommodate the environmental needs of dozens of species. Admiral Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, stood before the assembled delegates. The hall fell silent as the human who had changed the course of history prepared to speak. Friends, allies, former enemies, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors in a vast and wondrous galaxy. Humanity offers not dominion, but partnership, not submission, but cooperation, not fear, but hope." A Valdorian delegate stood and began to applaud. Soon the entire assembly was on their feet, representatives from species that had been enemies for centuries joining together in recognition of a new beginning. Even Admiral Vex, now serving as a reformed military advisor, watched from the observation gallery with tears in his yellow eyes. The proud warrior who had once terrorized peaceful worlds now worked to design defensive systems that could protect them. Later that evening, as the conference delegates mingled at the reception, young beings from different worlds played together in the gardens outside. Human children taught Valdorian youngsters to play baseball, while Nexari adolescents showed everyone how to create beautiful crystal sculptures. Dr. Paul Martinez, the head of the new interspecies cultural exchange, watched the children with satisfaction. "This is how it begins," he told his assistant. "Not with treaties or trade agreements, but with children who see differences as interesting rather than threatening." As the years passed, the galaxy slowly healed from centuries of conflict. Former Zephyrian colonies became independent democracies. Trade routes that had been closed by war reopened to benefit all species. Medical advances shared freely between worlds eliminated diseases that had plagued entire civilizations. Captain Ben Foster, now an instructor at the new combined species, Naval Academy, taught young officers from a dozen different worlds to work together. His students included humans, Valdorians, reformed Zephyrians, and even proud Nexari. "The key to victory," he told his mixed class, "is not having the biggest weapons or the most ships. The key is understanding that your real strength comes from the people who stand beside you, regardless of what world they call home." On Earth, now the diplomatic center of the galaxy, Ambassador Rodriguez walked through the memorial gardens dedicated to all those who had died in the years of conquest and war. The old soldier paused before a wall that listed names from every species, human and alien alike. "We remember them all," he said quietly to his companion, Admiral Vex. "The victims and the soldiers, the innocent and the guilty. They all deserve to be remembered so that their children can build a better future." The great war room on Zephyr Prime had never seen such chaos. Emperor Drex stood at the center of the massive chamber, his black eyes burning with rage as he watched the holographic replay of the battle. 6 of his best cruisers had been defeated by ships that appeared from nowhere. "Explain this to me again," Drex demanded, his deep voice echoing off the red marble walls. The tall emperor with scarred skin had ruled through fear for 30 years. No one had ever made him look weak before. "General." Korax stepped forward nervously. The old warrior had fought in dozens of battles, but had never seen anything like the human ships. "The vessels appeared without warning, my lord. Our sensors detected nothing until they attacked." "Stealth technology," Admiral Vex said from his position near the tactical display. "But far beyond anything we have encountered. Their ships moved faster than our best fighters, and their weapons were incredibly precise." Emperor Drex slammed his fist on the command table. "I do not care about their technology. I want to know how many ships they have and where they came from." "Intelligence reports suggest they originated from the Sol sector," reported Commander Quinn, the Empire's chief spy master. The thin Zephyrian with cold yellow eyes had sources throughout the galaxy. "That region has been silent for over 2 centuries. Because there was nothing there," Vex insisted. "These humans cannot have a large fleet. They are probably refugees, with a few stolen ships trying to look powerful." General Korax shook his head. "Sir, the coordination of their attack was perfect. Those pilots have trained together for years. This was not random refugees with stolen ships." Drex studied the tactical display showing the human fleet formation. 30 ships had appeared at once, all moving in perfect harmony. But 30 ships were nothing compared to the Zephyrian navy. "How many vessels do we have available for immediate deployment?" the Emperor asked. 473 warships, my lord," Admiral Vex replied proudly, "including 12 dreadnoughts and 40 heavy cruisers." The Emperor smiled for the first time since receiving the battle reports. "Then we will crush these myths once and for all. Prepare the Grand Fleet for immediate departure." "All of it, my lord?" General Corax asked in surprise. "Every ship," Drex confirmed. "I want the galaxy to see what happens to those who challenge the Zephyrian Empire. When we are finished with these humans, their name will become a warning to others." Across the galaxy in the Sol system, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the Situation Room aboard, the orbital station above Earth, surrounded by the greatest military minds humanity had produced. "Intelligence confirms the Zephyrians are mobilizing their entire fleet," reported Commander Kate Wilson, the head of Human Intelligence Operations. The blonde woman with sharp green eyes had spent years infiltrating alien communication networks. "Our sources count at least 500 ships." General Patricia Hayes leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. The tough woman with short brown hair commanded all human ground forces. "That is a lot of ships, Admiral." "Numbers are not everything," said Dr. Mike Stevens from his position at the technology station. The brilliant scientist with messy black hair had designed most of humanity's advanced weapons. "Our quantum torpedo tests have been successful. A single hit can disable their largest dreadnought." Captain Chris Taylor nodded in agreement. The former submarine commander had adapted underwater tactics for space warfare. "The key is not letting them use their numbers effectively. We control when and where the battle happens." Admiral Rodriguez studied the holographic display showing the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The enemy ships were still 3 days away from the Sol system. "What is the status of our defensive preparations?" "All orbital platforms are online," reported Colonel Frank Pierce, the defense coordinator. "The asteroid belt has been seeded with automated weapons platforms. Every major planet has shield generators and missile batteries." "And our fleet?" Rodriguez asked. Captain Lisa Matthews stepped forward. 200 ships ready for combat. Sir, every vessel has been upgraded with the latest technology. Our pilots are eager for the fight." Rodriguez turned to Dr. Helen Carter, who had been quietly reviewing alien psychology reports. "Doctor, what can you tell us about Zephyrian tactical thinking?" Carter looked up from her datapad. "They are predictable, Admiral. Zephyrians always attack head-on with overwhelming force. They believe superior numbers guarantee victory. They have never faced an enemy with significantly better technology." "That arrogance will be their downfall," Rodriguez said firmly. "But we must remember that each of those ships has a crew. When this is over, we want to be liberators, not conquerors." Meanwhile, on the refugee transport carrying Valdorian survivors, Elder Mira spoke with the human medical team that had come aboard. The young Valdorian who had escaped the destruction of her home world stared in wonder at the strange pale beings who had saved them. "Is it true that your people have been hidden for 200 years?" she asked Dr. Carter through a translator. Device. Carter smiled gently. "We were not hidden, child. We were healing. A great sickness nearly destroyed us long ago. We had to go away to become strong again." "And now you fight for us?" "We fight for anyone who cannot fight for themselves," Carter replied. "That is what humans do." Back on Zephyr Prime, the massive fleet was almost ready to depart. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Conqueror, watching smaller ships take their positions in the vast formation. The flagship was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the humans," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Vex ordered. The main screen showed Admiral Rodriguez sitting calmly in his command chair. The human looked older and more tired than before, but his eyes held steady determination. "Admiral Vex, I am Admiral Cain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Fleet. I am authorized to offer the Zephyrian Empire one final chance for peace." Vex laughed loudly. "Peace? You attack our ships and then demand peace? You are either brave or insane. Human?" "I prefer to think of myself as practical," Rodriguez replied. "Your Emperor is sending 500 ships to attack 30,000 human civilians in the Sol system. Those ships will be destroyed if they enter our territory." 30,000? Vex scoffed. "Your entire population fits on a few planets? We have 30 billion Zephyrians across our empire. Numbers do not determine the outcome of wars, Admiral. Preparation and technology do." Vex leaned forward in his command chair. "Then prepare to die, myth creature. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 12 star systems. Your little fleet will be nothing but debris floating in space." "I hope you are wrong, Admiral, for your sake and the sake of your crews." The transmission ended, leaving Vex staring at a blank screen. Something in the human's voice had troubled him, but he pushed the feeling aside. Numbers were numbers. 500 ships against 200 could only have one outcome. 3 hours later, the grand fleet of the Zephyrian Empire departed for the Sol system. The massive formation stretched across space like a metal storm cloud. Emperor Drex watched from the orbital palace, confident that his forces would return victorious. "Send word to all our territories," he ordered his ministers. "Let them know that the human myth dies today. Let them see what happens to those who challenge Zephyrian power." But in the cold darkness between the stars, human scout ships watched the enemy fleet approach. Captain Ben Foster and his Ghostwing squadron shadowed the massive Armada from a safe distance, reporting every movement back to Admiral Rodriguez. 503 vessels confirmed, Foster reported. Estimated arrival at Sol outer boundary in 72 hours. "Copy that, Ghost Leader," came Rodriguez's reply. "Fall back to Rally Point Alpha. It is time to show them what humans learned during our long exile." As the Zephyrian fleet pressed forward toward what they believed would be an easy victory, they had no idea that every human ship, every orbital platform, and every defensive system in the Sol system was already tracking their approach. The element of surprise that had served humanity so well was about to become a devastating trap. The greatest space battle in galactic history was about to begin, and the Zephyrians were flying straight into the jaws of a patient predator that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of angry hornets. 503 warships spread across space in perfect formation, their red hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Conqueror, expecting to see a few scattered human ships fleeing in terror. Instead, his sensors showed something impossible. "Sir, detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system," his tactical officer reported with confusion in his voice. "Multiple orbital platforms around every planet, weapon emplacements in the asteroid belt. And sir, there are ships everywhere." Vex stared at his display screen in disbelief. The Sol system was not the empty wasteland he had expected. It was a fortress. Every moon, every asteroid, every space station bristled with defensive weapons, and moving between them were sleek human warships that seemed to dance through space with impossible grace. "How many ships?" Vex demanded. 200 confirmed, sir, possibly more hidden behind the larger planets." Before Vex could respond, every screen on his bridge lit up with an incoming transmission. Admiral Rodriguez appeared, looking calm despite facing the largest fleet in galactic history. "Admiral Vex, welcome to the Sol system," Rodriguez said politely. "You still have time to withdraw your forces and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Surrender now, human, and I might allow some of your people to live as slaves," Vex replied with False confidence. Rodriguez shook his head sadly. I had hoped you would be wiser. Very well. You fired the first shot when you attacked those refugees. Now face the consequences. The transmission ended, and space around the Zephyrian fleet suddenly came alive with movement. Human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and moons revealed themselves. Captain Lisa Matthews led a squadron of destroyers in a sweeping arc around the enemy's right flank. All ships, execute Scorpion Protocol, Matthews announced over the fleet channel. Remember, we are not here to slaughter. Disable their ships, capture their crews. The battle began with a spectacular light show as hundreds of energy weapons fired across the darkness. But something was wrong. The human ships moved like they were reading the enemy's mind. Every Zephyrian shot seemed to miss, while every human weapon found its target. Commander Jake Sullivan coordinated the battle from his position on the Defiance. The tactical genius with black hair had spent years studying Zephyrian battle tactics. Ghost Wing, execute flanking maneuver 7. Destroyer Squadron 3, target the enemy command ship's weapon systems. Captain Ben Foster dove his fighter. Through a storm of enemy fire, his wingmen following in perfect formation. The 12 ships of Ghost Wing moved like a school of fish, impossible to target effectively. Their quantum-enhanced weapons punched through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. Target the bridge tower, Foster called to his pilots. Disable their command systems. Precise energy beams struck the Conqueror's command section, causing explosions that knocked Admiral Vex to the deck. Sparks showered around him as his bridge crew struggled to maintain control. "Return fire!" Vex screamed. "All ships concentrate on their flagship!" But the human flagship Defiance seemed to exist in a different universe. Zephyrian plasma bolts and missiles struck its energy shields and simply vanished, absorbed by technology the aliens had never seen before. Meanwhile, the human ship's return fire carved through enemy armor like a hot knife through butter. Captain Alex Thompson commanded the destroyer Ranger as it swept through the Zephyrian formation like a blade. The young officer with brown hair had trained his entire life for this moment. His ship's weapons disabled 3 enemy cruisers in rapid succession. "Sir, the enemy is trying to surround us," his tactical officer reported. Thompson smiled grimly. "Let them try. Execute Scatter Pattern Delta." The human ship suddenly spread out across the battlefield in a complex pattern that looked random but was actually carefully planned. Every movement drew the Zephyrians deeper into a trap they could not see. Major Lisa Garcia led a boarding party that teleported directly onto a disabled Zephyrian battleship. The Marine commander with short black hair found herself facing confused. Alien warriors who had never encountered human combat tactics. "Surrender and you will not be harmed," Garcia announced in the Zephyrian language. The alien captain stared at her in shock. "You speak our tongue?" "We have been studying you for 200 years, Garcia replied. "We know everything about your species. The question is, do you know anything about ours?" Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt, Commander Sam Brooks activated the hidden weapon platforms that had been waiting in silence. The torpedo boat commander watched as thousands of automated guns emerged from fake asteroids and began firing on the Zephyrian rear guard. "Surprise!" Brooks muttered, as enemy ships found themselves caught in a crossfire they had never expected. The Zephyrian formation began to collapse as panic spread through their ranks. Ships that had fought together for decades suddenly found themselves isolated and surrounded. Their advanced sensors could not track the human vessels that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Admiral Vex tried desperately to regain control of the battle. "All ships, fall back to defensive formation. Call for reinforcements from the home fleet." But his communications were being jammed by human electronic warfare systems. Captain Rachel Ford led a squadron of specialized ships that disrupted every Zephyrian signal while feeding false information to their sensors. "Sir, we are receiving multiple contacts on all sides," Vex's sensor operator reported in terror. "The humans appear to have thousands of ships. In reality, the The humans were using holographic projectors and sensor ghosts to make their 200 ships look like an entire armada. The Zephyrians were fighting shadows, while real human weapons struck from unexpected directions. Dr. Mike Stevens watched the battle from his command center deep inside an asteroid. The weapons designer saw his quantum torpedoes performing perfectly. Each shot phased through enemy shields and disabled critical systems without killing the crew. "Beautiful," he whispered, as another Zephyrian dreadnought went dark, its weapons offline, but its life support intact. The turning point came when Commander Jake Sullivan executed the final phase of Scorpion Protocol. Every human ship in the system suddenly appeared in the same place, forming a perfect sphere around the Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral Vex," came Rodriguez's voice over open channels, "your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons are ineffective against our shields. Your reinforcements cannot reach you through our jamming. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated with honor." Vex looked around his ruined bridge. Half his fleet was disabled and drifting. The other half was trapped inside a cage of human ships that seemed impossible to break. In 30 years of warfare, he had never seen such tactical perfection. "What are you?" he whispered. "We are what happens when a peaceful people are forced to become warriors," Rodriguez replied. "We are what you made us when you decided to conquer the innocent." The battle lasted only 4 hours. When it was over, 312 Zephyrian ships had been disabled and captured. 147 had been completely destroyed, when their crews refused to surrender. Only 44 ships managed to escape back toward Zephyrian space. Not a single human vessel was lost. As rescue teams moved through the captured alien ships, they found thousands of Zephyrian prisoners, staring at their human captors in shock. These proud warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for decades looked like frightened children. Admiral Vex sat in his cell aboard the human prison ship, trying to understand what had happened. A guard brought him food and water, treating him with more respect than he had ever shown his own prisoners. "How did you do it?" Vex asked the young human soldier. The guard, a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Kim, paused at the cell door. "We learned from our mistakes. We prepared. And most importantly, we never forgot that every life has value, even yours." As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, every species that had lived in fear of Zephyrian conquest began to hope. The myths were real. The humans had returned, and they fought not for empire or glory, but for the simple belief that the strong should protect the weak. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. A new chapter in galactic history had begun. Captain Ben Foster checked his instruments one final time as his fighter glided silently through space. The sleek black ship was invisible to enemy sensors, hidden by the same technology that kept the human fleet secret for 200 years. Around him, 11 other pilots from Ghost Wing Squadron waited for orders. "Ghost Leader, this is Defiance Command," came the voice of Lieutenant Amy Walsh through his helmet radio. "Zephyrian battle group is approaching Valdorian refugee convoy. You are cleared to observe only." Foster frowned inside his helmet. The young pilot with blonde hair and blue eyes had joined the military to protect people, not to watch them die. "Copy that, Command. Ghost Wing is moving to observation position." Below them, 20 Valdorian transport ships limped through space. The vessels were old and slow, packed with families who had escaped the destruction of their colonies. Foster could see children pressed against the windows, looking out at the stars with wonder despite their fear. "Contact bearing 270, called Ghost 4, pilot Jenny Cruz. "Zephyrian cruiser squadron incoming fast." Foster switched to long-range sensors and saw them. 6 Zephyrian warships approached like hungry wolves. Their red hulls gleamed with weapon ports and armor plating. These ships had destroyed dozens of peaceful worlds. On the bridge of the Zephyrian cruiser Bloodfang, Commander Zarex smiled as he watched the helpless transports. The tall alien with red skin and yellow eyes had earned his rank through cruelty. Destroying refugees was easy work that looked good in reports. "Weapons ready, sir," reported his gunner. "Target their engines first," Zarex ordered. "Let them float, helpless for a while before we finish them." The first plasma bolts reached out toward the Valdorian ships. Green energy beams struck the rear transport, causing explosions along its hull. The ship began to drift, its engines destroyed. Inside that transport, families screamed as the artificial gravity failed. An old Valdorian woman named Sarah held. Her granddaughter, tight as debris, floated past their faces. "The humans will come," she whispered, remembering the old stories. "They will save us." But the darkness of space remained empty. Foster watched the attack begin and felt his heart pounding. "Command, requesting permission to engage. They are killing civilians down there." "Negative, Ghost Leader," came Admiral Rodriguez's voice directly. "Hold position." "Sir, with respect, these people are going to die." Rodriguez paused for a long moment. On the bridge of the Defiance, he stared at the tactical display showing the slaughter below. Captain Matthews stood beside him, her hands clenched into fists. "Admiral," Matthews said quietly, "if we let this happen, we are no better than them." Rodriguez looked around his bridge. Every human face showed the same expression of barely controlled anger. These people had trained their whole lives to protect the innocent. Watching refugees die violated everything they believed in. "Admiral, Rodriguez to all ships," he announced over the fleet channel. "Execute Operation Revelation. All units, decloak and engage." The space around the Valdorian convoy suddenly filled with light as 30 human warships appeared from nothing. The sleek vessels with silver hulls and blue energy shields looked like angels emerging from heaven. The Zephyrians had never seen anything like them. "What in the name of the Emperor?" Commander Zarex gasped, staring at his suddenly crowded sensor display. "Where did they come from?" Foster grinned as his fighter became visible again. "Ghost Wing, you are cleared to engage. Protect those transports." The 12 human fighters dove toward the Zephyrian cruisers like silver arrows. Their advanced weapons systems locked onto enemy targets with deadly precision. But instead of destroying the cruisers, they fired carefully aimed shots at weapon ports and sensor arrays. The Zephyrian ship Bloodfang shook as multiple hits disabled its main guns. Zarex fell to the deck as sparks showered around him. "Return fire! All ships, return fire!" But the Zephyrian weapons could not penetrate the strange blue energy fields surrounding the human ships. Plasma bolts and missile strikes simply bounced off harmlessly. It was like throwing rocks at the moon. Captain Lisa Matthews stood on the bridge of her destroyer Vigilant as it moved between the refugees and their attackers. The ship's defensive systems easily absorbed the enemy fire, while precise return shots disabled Zephyrian engines and weapons. "Captain," called her communications officer, "Admiral Rodriguez is opening a channel to the Zephyrian commander." The main screen showed Admiral Rodriguez sitting calmly in his command chair. The older man with gray hair looked tired but determined. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance hummed with quiet efficiency. "Zephyrian Commander, this is Admiral Cain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Fleet. You will cease your attack on these civilians immediately." Commander Zarex appeared on screen, his red face twisted with confusion and rage. "Human, you cannot be real. Humans are myths, stories. You do not exist." "I assure you we are quite real," Rodriguez replied calmly. "As are our weapons. Stand. Down your ships and withdraw, or we will disable them permanently." "Never," Zarex snarled. "Even if you are real, you are outnumbered. 6 ships against 30 means nothing. We will call for reinforcements and crush you." Rodriguez smiled sadly. "Commander, you misunderstand the situation. We are not outnumbered. You are outmatched." To prove his point, the human ships suddenly accelerated far beyond what should have been possible. They moved through space like dancers, their formation changing in perfect coordination. Every shot they fired hit exactly where intended, disabling enemy systems without destroying the ships. Within minutes, all 6 Zephyrian cruisers drifted helpless in space. Their weapons were gone, their engines dead, their communications cut. The crew was alive, but completely powerless. Foster's fighter swept past the lead Zephyrian ship and saw alien faces pressed against the windows, staring at him in shock. These, proud warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for decades, looked like frightened children. "All Valdorian transports. This is the Human Defense Fleet," announced Lieutenant Walsh over open channels. "You are safe. Medical teams are standing by to assist with any injuries." The response from the refugee ships was immediate. Voices in the musical Valdorian language filled the radio channels, all saying the same thing over and over. Amy Walsh did not need a translator to understand. They were saying, "Thank you." Dr. Helen Carter beamed aboard the lead Valdorian transport to provide medical assistance. The red-haired scientist had studied alien biology for years, but this was her first time actually treating alien patients. Her hands shook slightly as she worked on an injured Valdorian child. "Are you really human?" asked the child's mother in broken standard language. "Yes," Carter replied gently. "We have been away for a long time, but we have returned." The Valdorian woman began to cry. The stories were true. The protectors have come back. Meanwhile, Colonel Tony Harrison led a boarding party onto the disabled Zephyrian flagship. The Marine commander with brown hair and stern eyes found Commander Zarex sitting in his ruined command chair, staring at nothing. "You are my prisoner," Harrison announced. Zarex looked up at the human with confusion in his yellow eyes. "What are you? Your ships, your weapons, they are beyond anything we have seen." "We are what happens when peaceful people are forced to become warriors," Harrison replied. "We do not seek conquest. We do not want your territory. But we will not allow you to slaughter innocents." Back on the Defiance, Admiral Rodriguez received reports from across the fleet. No human casualties. All Valdorian refugees safe. 6 Zephyrian ships captured with minimal damage. "Admiral," Captain Matthews said, "the Zephyrians are probably sending word to their fleet command right now." Rodriguez nodded. "Let them. It is time the galaxy learned that humans have returned, and it is time the Zephyrian Empire learned that their days of easy conquest are over." As the human fleet escorted the Valdorian refugees to safety, the news of their return spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the great chambers of the Nexari Council, ancient beings who had lived for centuries stared at reports in disbelief. On trading stations throughout known space, merchants whispered about ghost ships that appeared from nowhere, and on Zephyr Prime, Emperor Drex received Commander Zarex's final transmission with growing rage. The proud ruler with scarred red skin and cold black eyes had built an empire on fear and strength. The idea that mythical humans had humiliated his forces was unthinkable. "Summon the High Command," he ordered his servants. "If these humans want a war, they shall have one. We will show them what happens to those who challenge the Zephyrian Empire." But deep in space, Admiral Rodriguez was already preparing for that. War. Humanity had spent 2 centuries learning from their past mistakes. They would not be caught unprepared again. The blue flames of plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space as Admiral Marcus Vex watched another Valdorian transport ship break apart. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, arms crossed behind his back, feeling satisfied. The Zephyrian Empire was expanding again, and these peaceful farmers would not stop them. "Sir, the mining colony is sending surrender signals," reported his communications officer. "Ignore them. Destroy everything," Vex ordered. His red eyes gleamed with pride. The Zephyrians had conquered 12 star systems in the past 50 years. These weak Valdorians with their green skin and gentle nature would be easy prey. Down on the surface of Kepler 442b, explosions rocked the small mining settlement. Families ran toward the escape pods while Zephyrian fighters screamed overhead. An old Valdorian named Elder Kess helped load children into the last working transport. "Where will we go?" asked a young Valdorian girl named Mira. Her large black eyes were filled with tears. Elder Kess paused for a moment. His wrinkled hands shook as he sealed the transport door. "There are stories, child. Old stories about warriors who once protected the weak." "What warriors?" Mira asked. "The humans of Sol," Kess whispered. "They say these beings vanished long ago, but some believe they still watch from the shadows. The transport lifted off just as plasma fire destroyed their home." Mira pressed her face against the small window, watching her world burn below. 3 days later, the Zephyrian High Command met in their great war room on the capital world of Zephyr Prime. The massive chamber was filled with red marble and gold decorations. Admiral Vex stood before a holographic star map, pointing to new targets. "The Valdorian system will fall within a month," he announced to the gathered military leaders. "After that, we move toward the outer colonies." General Korax, an older Zephyrian with battle scars across his face, studied the map. "What about these reports from our prisoners? They keep talking about sending messages toward the Sol sector." Vex laughed loudly. "You mean the human myths? Come now, General. Those are just stories that traders tell in bars." "But, sir," another officer spoke up, "our intelligence shows that Sector has been completely silent for over 200 years. No ships, no signals, nothing. Because there is nothing there," Vex said firmly. "The humans were probably wiped out by disease or war long ago. Even if they did exist, they were never warriors. The stories say they were soft creatures who cared too much about each other." The room filled with laughter from the Zephyrian officers. They were proud warriors who had never lost a major battle. The idea of mythical humans worried them about as much as children's bedtime stories. Far away, near the planet Jupiter in the Sol system, something moved in the darkness. A long, sleek ship hung in space, completely invisible to any scanner. Its hull was painted black and covered with advanced stealth technology that bent light around it like water. On the bridge of this ghost ship, Captain Lisa Matthews stood quietly. Her brown hair was tied back in a military style, and her blue eyes watched the data streams flowing across her screens. She had been born in space, like most humans of her generation. Earth was home, but the stars were where they lived now. "Captain, we are receiving the emergency broadcasts from the Valdorian refugees," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh from her communications station. "How many ships did they lose?" Matthews asked. 15 transports, ma'am. About 30,000 civilians. The survivors are heading toward the Nexari border, hoping for sanctuary." Matthews felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "Any response from the Nexari?" "Negative. They are staying neutral, as usual." Across the bridge, Commander Jake Sullivan looked up from his tactical display. The tall man with black hair had spent his whole career preparing for this moment. "Captain, Admiral Rodriguez is requesting a priority channel." The main screen flickered, and Admiral Kane Rodriguez appeared. The older man with gray hair and kind eyes looked tired. Behind him, the bridge of the UHS Defiance hummed with quiet activity. "Lisa, I know what you are thinking," Rodriguez said, "but we are not ready yet." "Sir, with respect, when will we be ready? We have watched the Zephyrians destroy 6 peaceful colonies in the past year. How many more will die while we hide in the shadows?" Rodriguez sighed. "I understand your frustration, Captain, but we have been planning this for 2 centuries. The element of surprise is our greatest weapon. If we reveal ourselves too early, we lose everything." Matthews knew he was right, but it did not make watching the slaughter any easier. Humanity had retreated from galactic affairs in 2185 after a devastating plague had wiped out half their population. The galaxy had assumed they were extinct. In reality, they had spent the past 200 years rebuilding, advancing their technology, and preparing for their return. "What are your orders, sir?" Matthews asked. "Continue monitoring." Ghostwing. "Squadron will shadow the Zephyrian fleet. If they attack the Valdorian homeworld, we move to the next phase." The channel closed, leaving Matthews alone with her thoughts. Around her, the crew worked silently. They were all volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this mission. Each one knew that humanity's return to the galaxy would not be gentle. In his quarters, Dr. Helen Carter studied the biological data they had collected on the Zephyrians. The scientist with red hair and green eyes had spent years learning about the alien species that now controlled much of known space. Her job would be crucial when first contact finally happened. "Computer displays Zephyrian psychological profile," she said aloud. Data filled her screen. "The Zephyrian species value strength above all else. They respect only power and view compassion as weakness. Recommend approach through demonstration of superior capability rather than diplomatic negotiation." Carter frowned. Humans preferred to solve problems through talking and cooperation. But sometimes, she realized, you had to speak a language that others would understand. Meanwhile, on a small refugee ship carrying Valdorian survivors, Elder Kess sat with young Mira. The old being was dying from injuries he had suffered during the attack, but he wanted to tell her one more story. "Long ago," he whispered, "when my grandfather was young, he met a human trader. This being had strange pale skin and hair like sunshine, but his eyes were different from any creature in the galaxy." "How were they different?" Mira asked softly. "They held fire and ice at the same time, gentle enough to comfort a child, but cold enough to freeze the blood of enemies. The trader told my grandfather that humans never forgot their friends or forgave their enemies." Kess closed his eyes. "The trader said that if the galaxy ever needed them, humans would return. They would come from the darkness like ghosts, and their enemies would learn to fear the night." As the old Valdorian died, his final words echoed in the small ship. Unknown to him, human ships were already moving through the darkness, preparing to make his stories come true. The age of myths was ending. The time of reckoning had begun.